Why my alien classmates turned pale. One word, hippopotamus, HFY story. It was supposed to be a typical day at the Intergalactic Academy, a school where beings from various star systems gathered to learn about the diverse civilizations of the universe. But that day, something strange happened. My alien classmates, all from species with vastly different histories and appearances, looked visibly shaken. Their colors faded, their eyes widened in fear, and they stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, all because of one word. Hippopotamus. Let me back up a bit. My name is Jason, and I'm a human. That's right, a human. From Earth. It's not as common as you might think to see a human in intergalactic schools. Our planet is still relatively isolated, and most of the other species consider humans primitive, mostly because we don't have superintelligence or advanced tech like some of the other species. In fact, many of my classmates thought I was an anomaly, someone who'd somehow been admitted due to the Academy's inclusivity policies. But that was all about to change in my history class on galactic anthropology. We were studying the evolution of various species, focusing on predators and apex creatures from different planets. Professor Zrix, a towering, multi-limbed alien with a chitinous exoskeleton, had just finished discussing the terrifying, razor-toothed behemoth from the planet Krotok. Everyone had their notes out, their scanners at the ready, eager to learn about how this creature had terrorized its native planet for centuries. Then, he turned to me with a mischievous smile. "Jason," he said, his voice dripping with curiosity, "perhaps you'd like to tell us about one of Earth's apex predators?" I wasn't prepared for the spotlight. Most humans are quiet about their species' history here, knowing that our planet is often seen as a backwater in the galaxy. Our predators small and insignificant compared to those of other worlds, but something in my gut told me to rise to the occasion. I thought about it for a moment and then, with confidence, said, "Hippopotamus." There was an eerie silence. The aliens around me, beings from dozens of species across the galaxy, all turned pale. I had to do a double take. One of my classmates, a bright purple-skinned alien with tentacles for arms, actually started sweating. Another, a sleek reptilian from Noxus 9, dropped her tablet in shock. Even Zrix, the professor, froze in place. "Jason, please clarify," Zrix said, his voice now strained. "Hippopotamus," I repeated, with a grin. "It's a mammal, an apex predator from Earth. It's one of the most dangerous creatures you'll ever encounter." The room was completely still, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Are you serious?" said Vornax, a six-eyed creature from the planet Vorex. His voice was trembling, and he seemed on the verge of breaking into a cold sweat. I nodded. "Yeah, they weigh tons. They're territorial, and they kill more humans than most other predators. They can run faster than most creatures on land and are incredibly aggressive when provoked. Even a single one can rip apart a group of armed soldiers. They're not just big, they're incredibly dangerous." The silence dragged on. Then, a series of hushed murmurs spread through the room. One of the other students, a being from Xyloth, raised his hand, his voice trembling. "You're saying, the hippopotamus is the deadliest creature on your planet?" I chuckled. "Well, maybe not the deadliest, but it's certainly up there. They're terrifying." Zrix cleared his throat loudly, trying to regain control of the class. "Jason, while your species may have some dangerous animals, we are well aware of the most formidable creatures across the galaxy. A hippopotamus is no more than a novelty animal to us, not a true apex predator." But that was when I saw it, a flicker of fear in his eyes, the tiniest shiver in his legs. The other students were exchanging nervous glances, and I began to realize something unsettling. "You all don't know about the hippo, do you?" I asked, starting to piece it together. The silence deepened. Zrix looked at me with what could only be described as an expression of horror. "What do you mean?" I stood up, eager to share what I'd learned. "You see, the reason the hippopotamus is so dangerous is that it's incredibly aggressive, but it's also one of the few creatures on Earth capable of going toe-to-toe with the true apex predators, us, humans." The room was dead silent. It was like I had just opened a door into their greatest nightmare. The realization dawned on me like a wave, hitting me with the weight of its truth. "You've heard of Earth's violent history," I continued. "Our wars, our weapons of mass destruction, our ability to kill each other in terrifying ways. But no one ever thinks about how dangerous a human can be when backed into a corner, how a single species, with its basic intelligence and sheer determination, can overcome even the wildest odds. The hippopotamus? That's just a symbol. We humans have fought, survived, and triumphed against far worse. There was a long pause before Zrix spoke again, his voice hushed. The hippopotamus was one of your apex predators, and humans managed to survive it? How many of you survived? I smiled. All of us. The realization hit them like a tidal wave. My classmates, the aliens from across the galaxy, who had once looked down on humanity as a primitive, weak species, now saw us in an entirely different light. They could comprehend the power of advanced technology, the majesty of superintelligent beings, and the might of creatures much larger or faster. But what they didn't understand was the resilience of humanity, the ability to adapt, fight, and survive against anything that stood in our way, even when it seemed impossible. They turned pale, not from fear of the hippopotamus, but from the cold realization that if humanity could survive such a terrifying creature, what could we do to them if we ever had the chance? And that, I think, is why they've never quite looked at me the same way again. The days following my history class were strange, to say the least. The students who used to treat me with polite indifference now gave me wide, wary stares. Some avoided me entirely, while others seemed to study me in ways I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the hippopotamus story that had shaken them, it was the underlying truth about humanity that I had inadvertently revealed. It's a universal truth among advanced species: when you encounter something that doesn't make sense, something that doesn't follow the usual patterns of survival, you get scared. The hippopotamus wasn't just a quirky Earth animal, it was a symbol of what humans could do when pressed to the edge. I could tell the fear wasn't just about a single creature, but about us, about humans as a whole. I was in the cafeteria a few days later, grabbing a meal when I noticed Vornax, the six-eyed alien, hovering nearby. His usual purple skin seemed dimmer, like he hadn't been sleeping. He cleared his throat and hesitated before speaking. Jason, he began, his voice cautious. I need to ask, is it true that a single human could, if they wanted to, take down a hippo, a full-grown one? I nodded, then realized what he was asking. I don't know if a single human could do it. Not without the right tools, at least. But it's not just the strength of the human, it's the drive. We fight, we survive. That's how we got to the top of the food chain, despite being physically weaker than most of the creatures on Earth. Vornax's eyes flickered in thought. Then he looked around at the other students seated nearby. His voice lowered to a whisper. We've seen your species conquer your planet. Yes. But now I understand what you were really saying. You humans, you're unpredictable, uncontainable. I didn't say anything, but I could feel the weight of his words. He was right. For all the technology and civilizations that populated the galaxy, none of them could understand that one primal truth about humans, that we are defined not by our strengths but by our tenacity, our ability to adapt, overcome, and survive against the odds. The following week, the Academy held a field trip to the simulation chamber, where we could enter virtual environments and interact with digital recreations of dangerous creatures from across the galaxy. The professor suggested that everyone go in with an open mind. I wasn't sure what he meant until I found myself paired with a group of 4 students, including Vornax. The simulation was set to a hostile jungle environment. Massive, glowing predators stalked the trees, their claws sharp and their eyes glowing with hunger. In the simulation, these creatures were nearly impossible to defeat without advanced weaponry or superior tactics. We spent an hour dodging, hiding, and strategizing. As we were nearing a clearing, a massive, hulking beast appeared. It looked like a cross between a predator from Xyloth and one of those Krotok behemoths we had studied earlier, imposing, terrifying, with scales that shimmered like metal in the sun. The group froze, staring at the creature. It was too big to outrun and too fast to outmaneuver. The other students began to retreat, but I stayed still, my hand on the simulated weapon at my side. The creature snarled and lunged, its jaws snapping in the air. Without thinking, I charged. I wasn't faster or stronger than the creature, but I knew one thing: if I didn't fight back, I wouldn't survive. I dodged its attacks, slashed with my weapon, and drove it into a corner. It tried to retaliate, but I used every ounce of my instincts to outwit it. Knowing that I didn't just have to defeat it, I had to survive. The other students watched from behind rocks and trees, uncertain and afraid, while I faced the beast head-on. Eventually, I found an opening. I landed a decisive blow, and the creature fell to the ground, vanishing as the simulation ended. I stood there, panting, my heart racing. The group of students slowly emerged from their hiding spots, their eyes wide with shock. Vornax was the first to speak, his voice full of awe. You fought it? Like you would a hippopotamus? I nodded slowly, wiping sweat from my brow. Sometimes, survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about knowing when to act, when to fight, and when to take risks. That's what makes humans dangerous. The room was silent for a moment before another student, a small insectoid being named Thrax, stepped forward. You're right, Jason, he said, his voice trembling. We've always underestimated you, but now I understand. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't just learning from them, they were learning from me, too. Humans, in their unpredictable, wild nature, had something none of the other species could replicate, and that was what made us so much more dangerous than anyone had ever thought. The rest of the trip went by in a blur. The simulation was just a game, but the lesson stuck. My classmates no longer looked at me with fear. Instead, they looked at me with something else, respect. Something that I hadn't expected, but somehow knew was inevitable. From that point on, whenever someone mentioned Earth, or more specifically, humanity, the room would fall silent. They were no longer thinking of us as primitive or weak. They were thinking of us as a force of nature, unpredictable, relentless, and capable of surviving against even the greatest odds. And the next time they asked me about a creature from Earth, well, I knew they wouldn't be asking about the hippopotamus anymore. They'd be asking about us. The following weeks were a strange mix of new respect and cautious curiosity from my classmates. I could tell that the reality of humanity had sunk in for many of them. There was a sort of whispering atmosphere wherever I went, as if people were still digesting the implications of the hippopotamus incident and everything I'd said about humans' ability to survive anything that threatened us. Some of the more daring students even started approaching me, asking questions about Earth, about our history, our battles, and how we survived as a species. Most of them were still skeptical. Of course, it was one thing to hear about Earth's predators, but another thing entirely to imagine that my species had managed to thrive despite them. But there was one moment, one event that truly made the entire academy take notice of humanity's place in the galaxy. We were preparing for the annual Great Galactic Tournament, a competition held between the most elite students from every species in the academy. It was an event that tested everything: intelligence, strategy, physical prowess, and survival skills. Each year, the strongest or most skilled students from every planet competed in a series of challenges to prove their worth. This year, for the first time, the humans were allowed to enter. Naturally, I was one of the representatives chosen for the human team. I hadn't planned on being selected, but once it was clear that I wasn't exactly like other humans, once my classmates realized I'd survived by relying on more than just my physical strength, I was thrust into the spotlight. The first challenge was a battle of wits, a massive, living maze made of shifting walls and traps designed to disorient and confuse. The goal was to find the center, where the grand prize waited. As a species, humanity wasn't known for outmatching others intellectually, especially when facing alien species that had far longer histories of advanced technology and intelligence. But the one thing we had, the one thing that made us unique, was our ability to think on our feet. The maze was like nothing we'd seen before. One by one, students from other species were overwhelmed by the complexity of it. Beings from the planet Azoth, with their vast mental capabilities, were thrown off balance by the constant shifting of the walls. A species from the nebula planet Valith, known for their natural affinity with navigating the cosmos, found themselves out of their depth, unable to deal with the maze's disorienting physical nature. But me, I was used to adapting. I used the tricks that humans had been perfecting for centuries, things like pattern recognition, keeping calm under pressure, and the sheer persistence to push forward even when everything seemed to be against me. I mapped out the maze in my head, making mental notes of where walls had moved, where patterns started to repeat, and where the traps were. I made mistakes, sure, but each one taught me something new. After what felt like hours of careful navigation, I reached the center of the maze. There was no grand fanfare, no explosion of applause. The other students were too stunned to react. I had done it. I had won the first challenge for Team Earth. The next day, as we prepared for the next challenge, an obstacle course that tested speed, agility, and the ability to fight off simulated creatures, Vornax approached me again. He was quieter now, his 6 eyes studying me in a way I hadn't seen before. "Jason," he said, his voice low. I thought the maze was an accident. I didn't think it was possible for a human to actually win. But that was impressive." I shrugged. "It's all about adaptability. Humans are good at that." Vornax seemed to take that to heart, his tentacles twitching in thought. "I've been thinking about what you said in history class, about how humans fight to survive, no matter the odds." I wasn't trying to make it sound like we're unbeatable. I said, "We're just very stubborn." He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "That's something I think we can all learn from." The next challenge tested our physical abilities, combat against simulated beasts from various parts of the galaxy. I was paired with a student from Istron 4, a species that looked like walking, armored trees. They were strong, durable, and their natural armor made them nearly impossible to harm. But like many species from higher-tech civilizations, they lacked the same unpredictability and adaptability that humans had. When the creature, a monstrous, multi-headed beast with claws like scythes, attacked, it immediately went for the strongest member of our team. Istron 4 was powerful, but not quick. While it kept the creature distracted, I ran circles around it, dodging its blows and striking at its weak spots. It took time, but eventually, we brought the beast down. It wasn't just brute force, it was strategy, patience, and the willingness to adapt to whatever the situation threw at us. By the time we reached the final challenge, an extreme endurance test that simulated surviving on an alien planet without technology, I realized something profound. The other students had never fully grasped why humans were so resilient. It wasn't about individual strength or intelligence. It was about survival, and humans had been perfecting the art of survival for centuries. When the competition ended, Team Earth didn't win every event, but we had made it to the final round, and that alone had shaken the confidence of everyone watching. After the tournament, the respect I'd gained wasn't just for my skills or my ability to survive. It was because I had shown them something none of them had considered before. In a galaxy full of powerful, intelligent, and technologically advanced species, humanity wasn't the strongest, but we were the ones who would always find a way to fight back, no matter what. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most dangerous thing of all. As I walked out of the final ceremony, I saw Vornax again, standing near the entrance, looking at me with a knowing expression. "You've made us all rethink our understanding of your species," he said. I grinned, feeling the weight of everything we'd just accomplished. "I told you, we humans don't give up. Not ever." And that was all I needed to say. The rest of the galaxy now knew exactly who we were. The aftermath of the tournament left an unexpected shift in the air. The respect my team had earned was palpable, and not just from the students, but from the professors and even the higher-ups in the academy. It felt like the entire institution had woken up to something they'd never truly understood about humans. Our resilience was not just a quirk. It was a fundamental trait, woven into our very biology and psychology. A trait that could not be ignored, no matter how advanced a species might be. But while the tournament had made our mark, something else was quietly brewing behind the scenes. The galactic community, for all its vastness and intellectual superiority, had not yet fully considered what a force humanity could be, not just in terms of surviving or winning challenges, but in real-world application. And as it turned out, that application wasn't just theoretical. I had learned that a few days after the tournament ended. I had just returned to my dorm, still riding high on the afterglow of the competition, when an urgent message flashed across my terminal screen. It was from Zrix, the professor who had first called me out in history class. His usually stern tone was noticeably shaken as he spoke. "Jason, meet me in the central hall immediately. There's something important I need to discuss with you." A sense of unease twisted in my gut. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I knew it had something to do with the impact of our victory in the tournament. I quickly made my way to the central hall, a large, open area where the most important decisions were often made. When I arrived, Zrix was pacing in front of a holographic display, his chitinous exoskeleton reflecting the light from the projections. He stopped as soon as he saw me and motioned for me to approach. "Jason," he said, his voice serious, "you've gained the attention of a very powerful group, and I need to know if you're ready for what that means." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? I thought the tournament was over." Zrix's eyes narrowed. "It's not about the tournament. It's about what your victory represents. You've unknowingly drawn the attention of a faction of species that's been watching humanity for years, an alliance of highly influential beings from across the galaxy. They believe your species' resilience could be key to something much bigger than any competition or academic achievement. But there's a problem." I leaned in, the unease growing. "What problem?" "They want you to join them," Zrix said, his voice lowered. "They want humanity to become part of an effort that could change the balance of power in this entire galaxy." I blinked, feeling the weight of his words sink in. "You mean, they want to use us?" "Not exactly," Zrix replied. "They want you to be allies, but in doing so, they would expect humanity to participate in something far greater than anyone could have predicted, and that could either elevate your species or lead to its destruction." I ran a hand through my hair, my mind racing. What's this all about? Then, what do they want? Zrix hesitated for a moment, his mandibles clicking in thought. "A threat has emerged, a force that threatens the stability of the entire galaxy. It's not just a military force, but something more, something that could unravel the very fabric of galactic unity, and these factions believe humanity could be the key to countering it." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "You mean, we're being drafted into a war?" Zrix nodded gravely. "A war against something we don't fully understand, but they believe humanity's ability to adapt, to survive, could make all the difference. That resilience you've shown in the tournament? It's not just about winning. It's about proving that your species could endure and evolve in ways the others cannot." I was silent for a long moment, processing what he had just said. A war, an unknown threat, and humanity, my species, being chosen as a key player in the fight. It felt surreal, like something out of a science fiction story. But the truth was undeniable. This was real, and it was happening right now. "And what do you expect from me?" I finally asked, my voice low. Zrix looked at me, his multi-limbed figure towering over me. "We need you to make a decision. The Council is waiting for your answer. If you agree to join, you will represent humanity in this alliance. It won't be easy, and it won't be without risk, but it could change the course of your species' history." I took a deep breath, weighing the options. There was a part of me that felt terrified, unsure of what was to come, but another part, something deep within me, maybe a small, primal part of being human, felt a flicker of excitement. The idea that humanity, with all its flaws and imperfections, could rise to the occasion and face this challenge head-on was exhilarating. "I'll do it," I said, finally making my decision. "I'll represent humanity. We don't back down from challenges. We never have." Zrix nodded solemnly. "Very well. Prepare yourself. This is only the beginning." In the days that followed, things moved quickly. I was introduced to a new set of allies, representatives from some of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. Each of them had their own motives, but all agreed on one thing: humanity had proven itself to be unpredictable, adaptable, and dangerous in ways that even the most advanced species couldn't fathom. And now, it seemed we were about to find out just how dangerous we could be. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I knew one thing for sure: humanity had always been underestimated. And soon, the galaxy would find out just how wrong they were. The challenge wasn't just survival anymore. It was something far more intense, and this time, humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. We were fighting to reshape the future of the galaxy itself. The days that followed were a blur of strategy sessions, technology upgrades, and intense simulations. The Alliance quickly realized that this war wouldn't be fought with traditional weapons or tactics. It would require innovation and a kind of improvisation that no other species could match. As humanity's representative, I became both a student and a teacher in equal measure. I was learning from the galaxy's greatest minds, but I was also showing them how to think like we did, how to survive against all odds. Our first task was to understand the Nexus. The intelligence behind it wasn't like anything we had encountered before. It wasn't motivated by greed, conquest, or domination. It simply absorbed everything it came in contact with. It consumed civilizations, their technology, their culture, and their biology, and then evolved. It adapted, learning from everything it absorbed, becoming more powerful and more unpredictable with each passing day. The Nexus didn't leave any survivors to study. There were no records, no survivors who could tell us what we were facing. Every species that tried to resist had been wiped out or absorbed, leaving nothing behind but empty, lifeless planets. We were working with incomplete data, relying on the fragments of intelligence we could gather from destroyed worlds. The device that Zrix had shown me, the one we hoped could disrupt the Nexus, was still a mystery. It was a weapon, but not in the conventional sense. It wasn't designed to destroy, it was designed to break the Nexus's link between its consciousness and the individuals it had absorbed, to unravel the collective mind that held it together. But the device was experimental. It had never been tested in real combat. The risks were enormous. If it didn't work, we could provoke the Nexus to evolve in ways we couldn't predict, and the consequences would be catastrophic. The strategy sessions became more urgent as we raced against time. Every day the Nexus advanced closer to the galaxy's core, growing stronger. My role became clearer. I would lead a team to deliver the device to the heart of the Nexus's territory, where we hoped to use it to destabilize its collective consciousness. The mission was unprecedented, and the odds were long, but humanity had never shied away from impossible odds. I spent hours with the best tacticians, strategizing how we could outmaneuver a foe that could predict our every move. The Nexus was more than just a physical threat, it was an intelligence that could anticipate tactics, counter strategies, and learn from each confrontation. In every simulation, we found ourselves being outwitted at every turn. But then, a strange realization hit me. The Nexus could anticipate, but it couldn't adapt in the same way humans could. It was a machine, a vast, intelligent machine, but one that relied on logic and pattern recognition. It didn't understand chaos. It didn't understand unpredictability. It was a collective of minds, but it lacked the sheer creative instinct that had defined humanity's survival. That was our advantage. While the Nexus evolved by absorbing and learning, we humans had evolved by thinking outside the box. We were creatures of improvisation, of doing the unexpected, of finding solutions when there seemed to be none. I called for a private meeting with the commanders of the Alliance, my voice steady despite the tension in the room. We've been playing by the Nexus's rules, I said, and it's been winning every time. But it doesn't understand the human mind. It doesn't understand what we're capable of when we think beyond the confines of logic. We need to stop trying to outsmart it at its own game. We need to throw it off balance. Make it second-guess itself. We need to act unpredictably. The alien commanders looked at each other, hesitant at first, but then slowly nodded. It wasn't what they had expected to hear, but they had come to trust me. They knew I was right. The Nexus couldn't predict us, not if we acted on instinct, not if we fought like humans fought. That night, we finalized our plans. We had no idea how long the device would last, or if it would even work at all, but we had one shot. One chance to strike at the heart of the Nexus and disrupt its collective mind. We would infiltrate its territory using cloaked ships, find its central core, and deploy the device in the middle of its strongest hive. We were going in blind, but there was a sense of unity among us now. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. We weren't just allies anymore. We were equals, and that meant something. The day of the mission arrived faster than I anticipated. The countdown echoed through the halls of the flagship, and I stood on the bridge, watching as our ships lined up for the final departure. The Vori, the Hegemon, and the smaller factions had all contributed resources, ships, and soldiers to the effort, but the one thing they couldn't provide was the wild, unpredictable instinct that humanity brought to the table. It was up to us to take the first step into the unknown. The cloaked ships launched into the blackness of space, cutting through the void toward the Nexus's territory. Our scanners were useless in the face of its shifting energy field. We couldn't see what lay ahead, but we knew it was coming. As we entered the heart of Nexus-controlled space, the silence was almost deafening. We could feel it, this strange, pulsating presence, like the heartbeat of an unseen entity. We were being watched, and for the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of humanity's legacy pressing on me. This was it. This was our moment. We reached the central hub of the Nexus, a massive, swirling vortex of energy, where the collective consciousness was strongest. I ordered the deployment of the device. The plan was simple: the device would unleash a pulse, one that would attempt to sever the Nexus's connection to its collective consciousness and cause it to destabilize. But we had no idea how the Nexus would react. I felt my pulse quicken as the countdown ticked down. I knew the risks. If the device didn't work, we would become the next additions to the Nexus's ever-growing collective. But if it did work, we might just have a chance to sever the entity's hold on the galaxy, to stop it from consuming everything in its path. The final countdown ended. "Now," I said, my voice barely a whisper. And then, the pulse was released. For a moment, everything went still. The swirling vortex before us began to slow, its once powerful energy field flickering like a dying star. And then, as if the entire universe had taken a collective breath, the Nexus reacted. It fought back. The massive, dark energy surged outward, and the space around us twisted, pulling at our ships, pulling at the very fabric of reality itself. We were in the eye of a storm, the heart of the Nexus itself, and the device had begun to unravel the fabric of its collective mind. But this was just the beginning. The Nexus had been caught off guard, but now we would need everything we had, every ounce of human ingenuity, every drop of our relentless spirit, to finish what we had started. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for the future of every living being in the galaxy, and we wouldn't stop until the Nexus knew the true power of humanity's will to fight. The pulse from the device sent shockwaves through the fabric of space itself. The black, swirling mass before us, the heart of the Nexus, shuddered as if struck by an unseen force. The energy field surrounding it crackled violently, and for a brief moment, the vast darkness of space felt almost alive, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. Then, the reaction came. It was as if the Nexus, an intelligence born of consumption and adaptation, had realized something was wrong. Its entire essence recoiled, its once harmonious energy field twisting in unpredictable directions. The devices that had once been part of the Nexus's collective mind began to falter, their connection severed, fragmented. But rather than collapse, the energy surged, its disarray fueling a rage that was almost tangible. A deep, unnatural hum filled the communication channels as the Nexus fought to regain control. "Everyone, brace for impact," I yelled, gripping the edge of my console as the ship lurched violently. Our cloaked ships were shaking under the strain of the destabilizing field. The pulses from the device had cracked the Nexus's mental structure, but it wasn't over yet. This was only the beginning of the battle. We had achieved our first victory, but the Nexus wasn't just going to fall apart without retaliation. The first wave of its counterattack came in the form of energy blasts, massive pulses that slammed into our fleet. Our ship's shields flared bright as they absorbed the impact, but the force was enough to push us back. The gravitational pull of the Nexus seemed to increase, distorting spacetime itself, dragging us closer to its core. I could hear the crew members' voices over the intercom, their frantic instructions as they struggled to maintain control of the ship. Yet despite the chaos, there was something exhilarating about it. We were human, and we adapted. The Nexus was powerful, but it couldn't anticipate the randomness, the improvisation, that came with human ingenuity. "Activate evasive maneuvers," I barked, tapping into the impulse of desperation that surged through my veins. "Use the gravity wells, force them to adapt to us, not the other way around." The ship surged to life as the crew executed the most unpredictable, erratic patterns possible. The Nexus tried to predict our movements, but we were never where it expected us to be. It fought against the randomness, but it struggled to keep up, and for a moment, I felt like I was one step ahead of it. Then came the second wave, the hive pods. The Nexus wasn't just an intelligent entity, it had evolved into something even more terrifying. The individual beings it absorbed were now part of it, like extensions of its mind. These hive pods were the result of that absorption, bizarre, twisted creatures that were part technology, part organic matter. They moved with a kind of unnatural synchronicity, their movements more like a well-trained swarm of insects than individual entities. The pods began launching themselves toward us, their tendrils snaking through space. They were designed to latch onto ships, infect them with the Nexus's collective consciousness, and turn our own technology against us. The ships closest to the Nexus began to spark, their systems failing as the pods attached to them. "We need to cut them off before they get to us," one of my officers shouted, voice cracking with urgency. I nodded, already formulating a plan. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its adaptability. But we didn't just adapt, we used our environment to our advantage. "Deploy the decoys, create false signals to lead the pods away from the fleet," I ordered, fingers flying over the ship's control panel. "We'll trick them into thinking we're somewhere we're not." The decoys we launched were simple enough, beacons that emitted false energy signals, designed to mimic the ship's energy signatures. The pods, driven by the Nexus's desire to assimilate, would follow the decoys, diverting their focus away from the main fleet. The pods took the bait. We watched as the swarms broke off, following the decoys into empty space, where they were absorbed by their own confusion. But it wouldn't last forever. The Nexus was learning. As the hive pods were redirected, I turned my attention back to the device. The pulse it had emitted had disrupted the Nexus's collective mind. But it was only temporary. We needed to finish what we had started, and the longer we delayed, the more dangerous the situation would become. "Prepare for another pulse," I ordered, my voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We need to destabilize their core. We hit them hard, hit them fast." Zrix's voice crackled over the comms, his tone urgent. "Jason, we're not sure the device will hold much longer. The Nexus is adapting. You need to finish this before it gets any stronger." I didn't hesitate. There was no time to doubt. We were in the heart of the storm, and if we didn't act now, we would all be swallowed by it. I activated the pulse once more. The energy from the device surged outward, pushing against the collective consciousness of the Nexus. The response was instantaneous. The Nexus fought to reassert itself, its presence flaring up with explosive force, warping space around us. For a split second, it felt like we were inside the Nexus, like its mind was everywhere. The darkness enveloped us, and I could feel the weight of billions of minds pressing against our own. But amidst that overwhelming tide, I heard something. It was faint, a whisper at the edge of my consciousness, but it was unmistakable. It was human, a fleeting thought. "This is who we are." The Nexus was powerful, yes, but humanity had always fought not just for survival, but for meaning, for purpose. We had always found ways to carve out a space for ourselves, even when the odds were impossible. And in that moment, I knew what we had to do. "Full power to the device," I yelled. "Disrupt their core, now." The pulse erupted, stronger than before, and this time, the Nexus could not stop it. Its mind fractured. The energy around us flickered, then collapsed in on itself. The core of the Nexus, the heart of its collective consciousness, exploded in a burst of energy so intense. It was like the very fabric of reality was torn apart. And then, silence. We were in the eye of the storm, the remnants of the Nexus scattering into the void. The space around us was eerily calm, the overwhelming presence we had felt moments ago gone. We had done it. The Nexus's hold on the galaxy had been severed. But I knew this wasn't the end. The device had only disrupted its core, it had broken the Nexus's collective mind. But it wasn't gone. It would adapt. It would evolve again. And next time, humanity would be ready. As the crew members began to breathe easier, I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of pride. The war wasn't over, but humanity had shown the galaxy something it hadn't expected. We weren't just survivors, we were fighters, and the Nexus had learned that the hard way. The days following the battle were filled with both celebration and caution. The Nexus had been destabilized, but it was far from defeated. There would be more battles ahead, but as I stood among the ranks of my fellow humans, surrounded by alien allies who now regarded us with newfound respect, I knew this was only the beginning. We had been underestimated, but no longer. The galaxy would never forget that when it mattered most, humanity had risen to the challenge, and proved that we could never, ever, be predicted. And that, I realized, was humanity's greatest strength.